Hey guys, today I am here to praise and recommend one of my favorite manga of all time. I first heard of this manga in 2017. I've alluded to this briefly before, but 2017 was simultaneously a very difficult but very amazing year. I discovered many of my favorite works of all time in this year, and now that I think about it, it's likely due to my own struggles changing my taste in what I sought out in consuming media. When reading this work for the first time, I felt such a strong connection to it because the experiences portrayed resembled my own so closely. Once again, during a particularly lonely period when I was living in China in 2019, I actually reread this manga and discovered that there was a sequel. Again, this manga was just too relatable, and knowing that someone faced struggles similar to mine helped me get through yet another tough time. Lastly, I only recently remembered that this manga existed last night, and after reflecting on what a difficult year I had in 2021, I decided that it was a work worth revisiting, especially because I could share it with you guys. And let me tell you, this third read-through actually enabled me to understand even more from the text than I did the previous two times. So without further delay, let me introduce this book to you, tell you the basics of the plot just to get you hooked, and then I will lay out this work's own profundity. Before I do though, please hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Thank you. The title of the manga is a bit funny. It's called My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness and Depression. So shout out to the LGBTQ people of the world famous Alphabet Army. Anyway, jokes aside, at first, I thought this was going to be another light-hearted Yuri novel that would ease my aching heart, but don't let the title and cover deceive you. It is a profound work that dives deep into the author's personal life and puts her problems and issues on full display for the viewer to judge. For me, reading this work was painfully relatable, which is why I formed such a deep connection with it so quickly. To give you guys a quick summary, this manga stars the author, pen name Nagata Kabi, and to hook the reader, it starts chronologically where Nagata, 28 years old, a kissless virgin with social anxiety, is staring face to face with an escort she hired to lose her virginity. How did she end up in this precarious situation? Well, like many of us, Nagata left high school in a very complicated state. She wasn't quite an adult, but also wasn't a child anymore, and like most of us, was shuffled into university at the urging of her parents. Unfortunately, Nagata was not doing especially well in school. Not that she wasn't capable, but just like myself reading this work in 2017, she had no reason to be in school. She was merely following the path that people encouraged her to walk. It's a sad truth, but without tenacity and grit and the unending desire to graduate under any circumstances, it isn't very easy to complete a college degree. She dropped out and very quickly fell into depression. After all, she knew who she was in high school, and she knew who she was in college, but as an adult that was then no longer in school, the world seemed vast, and there were no more instructions on what to do next. I think it's a natural feeling to have. After all, during your time as a child, all the way through graduating, there's only one thing you need to do: go to school. Once that's all over and done with, you enter into a completely new existence that you have absolutely zero experience with. Feeling purposeless, depressed, and lacking a sense of belonging, she works various part-time jobs, hoping to fill the void. But as she discovers, jobs are merely a transaction of your labor in exchange for money. The happy family she was seeking in her various part-time jobs was only a fantasy. Unfortunately, when you're at a place like this in life, and feel that you're a failure of a human being, you can very quickly get into the mindset that since you are a failed human, you don't deserve certain things like food or basic comforts like being clean. That's why, during her part-time work, she stopped eating, and at some point, her body reacted and she developed a binge eating disorder to counteract her starvation. As disorders work, it is incredibly hard to get back into a normal eating schedule due to the guilt and sickness of binge eating, and then having the feeling of needing to fast to balance out all the calories you just ate. As this situation developed, she naturally became very sickly and she started needing to skimp out of work because she was too frail, and ultimately she landed in the hospital. Despite all this, she actually felt relieved at being in this condition because although she had been internally in this condition for a very long time, falling apart on the inside, lost and aimless on the inside, not quite all there, just waiting for death, the expectations of people in her life contradicted her condition. Again, it's very unfortunate when parents don't see the bigger picture and only see you as someone who has nothing wrong with them, but is still failing to move at the pace of a normal person and grow up. And it was hinted that these were the attitudes she had to face while living at home. I deeply relate to her struggles in just barely maintaining her part-time work, where she is working as hard as she possibly can, and yet the outside people think that this was her slacking off and taking life easy, when it was really the opposite. Throughout my high school life and college, I faced similar challenges, so I too understand how hard it is at this low point in your life. However, your lowest point is defined by when you finally start turning things around. And with immense effort, she was able to eat a normal amount 3 times a day and go to bed at night and wake up in the morning. When you already live out these habits, this is normal. But that's because most of us are taught to take care of ourselves, and we don't even realize small things like this is taking care of ourselves. But for someone who has let go of everything, and are letting themselves rot away until they die, merely staying clean and eating healthy is more than just an arm's reach away. After she regained her basic health, she continued to seek employment to finally become that real adult that everyone's expecting her to be. From here on out, the manga depicts her challenges of slowly understanding her years of mental health challenges and her learning ways to address these challenges, slowly working through life. However, the real charm of the manga is that Nagata doesn't ever really know what she's doing. She just tries what she thinks is the right thing to do, and very slowly, over time, she makes progress, little by little. This is one of the profundities of the novel. This is how real life is. In fiction, the protagonist usually discovers something, and they know exactly what to do. But in real life, you only get hints and whispers of the direction you are supposed to take, and can only make your best guess on what you should do afterwards. Without spoiling the finer details of the work, she eventually discovers her own childhood traumas, her repressed sexuality, her own desire to love and accept herself, and as a result, finally achieves the self-love necessary to pursue her own goals instead of being trapped by constantly trying to please her parents. This culminates at the climax of the novel, hiring an escort. This was a monumental moment for her, because on the inside, it represented the battle of her own will versus what she imagines is the will of her parents. What she was doing would make her parents lose their minds if they found out, but she was willing to pursue this anyway, as it was her first step in listening to herself and fulfilling her own needs without consideration of what other people want of her. It was her first act of true self-direction and independence. The manga continues after this, and I skipped over plenty of details, but I wanted to give you the main details as skimmed over as possible so you can understand what I'm talking about, while still leaving plenty of substance for you to enjoy the manga to the fullest when reading it yourself. First and foremost, I absolutely love that the author does not exemplify her behavior. She tells it exactly how it is without additional self-pity or glorification, and she lays it all out to see. This makes the work super raw and genuine, and really lets you feel for and connect with the author. I truly have to congratulate Nagata for telling her whole story, abashedly and unashamedly. Another point which separates this story from most others is that she highlights her realization that she did not love herself at all and desperately needed to learn how to. When I read this manga at 19 and then at 21, I hadn't come to this understanding yet. The first half of the novel was so relatable, while when I read the second half, I felt very happy for the author, but I hadn't learned these concepts for myself, and so I was still stuck in some of the situations that Nagata was. And yet, after my very difficult last year, I have finally discovered my own understanding of what these words mean, of what self-love is and why it enhances your life so much. Not caring about others' expectations of you, understanding yourself well enough to even know what you want to do with your life, it isn't easy. It's incredibly complex. And like Nagata, It felt like I never knew how I would get there until very slowly, wandering in an endless fog, I eventually did. After she learned to love herself, she suddenly wanted to take care of herself, and after learning how to recognize her own desires, she wanted to be strong so she could pursue her dreams in the vast world. However, when she first started taking care of herself, she realized that it's actually a lot of work. It's so much easier to not shower, wear dirty clothes every day, and not brush your teeth. But when you love yourself, you want to have clean clothes, clean teeth, clean hair, and in truth, taking care of yourself does feel good when you love yourself and let yourself enjoy these simple luxuries. Yes, in my experience too, taking proper care of myself is a lot of work. It's much easier to be a smelly person with grown out facial hair and eat McDonald's every single day. But I love myself, and therefore shower every day and eat fruit every day, pursue exercise and get enough sleep, all for the sake of my own personal health. She's right though, it's expensive and it's time consuming. But ultimately, pursuing health is virtuous, and you deserve to have the health benefits of these activities, so you should put in the work for your own sake. This work is such a realistic depiction of people's real-life challenges, that is, her situation, my own situations, and I assume many other situations as well. Because when you put in the work to take care of yourself, love yourself, and give yourself permission to do what you want to do, doing the work becomes so much easier. That was exactly her case, and it's exactly my case as well. Somehow, with these factors in place, it's so much easier for me to make video after video when I'm doing what I want to do. Another thing that I really like about this work is that she's so candid. She shows things that are so embarrassing. For example, we all have our innermost desires, such as having someone see our biggest insecurities and perhaps even more secretly, hoping that they love us for it. But often, when we think about such things, we become dismissing to ourselves and feel that we deserve to be punished for such thoughts. But you're not doing anything wrong by having these private desires. She, along with many of us, are scared of showing the world our true selves. We think back to all the painful times during childhood when you didn't know any better and were burned by being your true self. But, as she discovers, and as I have discovered myself, being your true self is your greatest gift to the world, and the only tricky part is finding the people who will love it for you. Another important part of this series I wish to highlight, in her journey of self-discovery of hiring this escort, she even borrowed money from her mom to go and do something her mom would naturally disapprove of, but she didn't care. When we have deep talks on my Discord server, I sometimes use the phrase, a goal worth sacrificing for, or a goal so worth pursuing that even death is an acceptable risk. For me, living in China was this goal. It was my first act of ever doing something I wanted to do. It was so important to me that despite the risks, the dangers, the potential trouble I could have gotten into, I knew from the get-go that this was so immeasurably important for my life and for myself that no consequence was too bad to pursue this dream. Another detail I'd like to highlight that I only discovered on my third time reading, in one panel of her manga, she shows what she'd been reading recently and mentions the Japanese author Osamu Dazai. This reference flew over my head the first time I read this manga, but now that I've read some of Dazai's work, it makes sense. Dazai's literature is very famous in Japan, even being taught in some Japanese schools, much like how particular authors are taught in American schools. Dazai also had a tendency to write about himself and show the truth of himself, no matter how ugly. Much like this work, Dazai's No Longer Human is another literary work that I absolutely love to death because the author can portray himself so well as simply human, someone to truly be sorry for without actually concealing the magnitude of his pathetic situation. He was not a good person, but he doesn't ask to be seen that way. He only asks for people to understand. I also really relate to the part where she said that she understood that the cause of her social anxiety was her trying to appear more than she was, and that she finally felt comfortable around other people when she learned to be okay with being herself. Additionally, much like how Nagata didn't understand her place until she finally wrote this manga, I too relate, as I felt much like her until I started this YouTube channel. But I have people like you here who support me and support my work. I have to say, the feeling is exactly the same as hers. Much like her, I also used to question how other people could simply wake up day after day and slave away at their jobs. I used to think I was missing something that everyone else simply had. However, for us special people, people who are not exactly the norm of society, it can sometimes take much longer to find these places where we truly belong. The first 2 times I read this book, I still had no idea where I belonged. But even in spite of this, it was always a pleasurable read because her problems were so relatable and the steps she took to address her own problems were inspiring. Even when she was helpless and pathetic, when she was rotting away on the floor, I completely related, as throughout my life, I have also been in the exact same miserable state, passed out on the floor, just waiting to die. But when you finally find that thing that you're meant to do, the energy to live and live properly comes naturally. Lately, it's become significantly easier to take care of myself, to go to work, save money, and then in the evening, produce these YouTube videos, because I'm certain that this is how I want to leave my tiny mark in history. This is how I want to spend my life, and even if I received 0 recognition and 0 financial reward, I would still love doing this, expressing myself and my opinion to the truest, fullest extent. Just like this frame right here, where she says she is fueled by the passion of her fans, transmitting her signal, having people receive it, and being recognized, I completely understand what she's saying here. When people watch my videos and they understand what I'm so desperately trying to say, I feel understood, and I feel that what I have to say matters. It feels like I'm not just an aimless person within the shadows of society. I'm so shook at my 3rd time reading because I finally understand what she was talking about towards the end, how self-love leads to motivation to pursue your own goals. Anyway, I think I've covered as much of this manga as I can without spoiling the entire experience, so I would urge you all to please support the author and buy her translated work on Amazon. I ordered the manga as well as its sequels and her other work myself. The Amazon link is in the description. If you're in a situation where you cannot afford to do so, I will also link her Twitter page so that you may follow her and keep up with her work, perhaps supporting her in your own way as a fan. I give this manga a 10 out of 10, a perfect work that has made the world a better place, and I am grateful for her for being herself and being willing to so candidly share her story with the world. One last time, please like the video if you enjoyed it, and if you'd like to see future work produced by myself, subscribe. I am the Content Savant. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.